Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like on this video, and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. Now, let's get into the story. Far out in the Indian Ocean, there is a place avoided by sailors, feared by fishermen, and marked only faintly on most maps. From above, it looks like paradise. Emerald trees pressing against white sands, turquoise water breaking in gentle waves on untouched shores. But to those who live along the nearby coasts, this island is not paradise. It is a warning, a wound in the ocean where outsiders do not survive. For centuries, the island has been home to an isolated tribe. No one knows exactly how long they have lived there. Some estimates suggest tens of thousands of years. What is certain is that they have chosen complete isolation, and they defend it with a ferocity that has turned the island into a graveyard for intruders. The oldest records come from the 18th century, when British sailors attempted to land after their ship was caught in a storm. Diaries recovered from one survivor describe figures appearing on the beach, armed with spears and bows. They made no sound, he wrote, but their presence was a wall we could not pass. Days later, only 2 men escaped alive, rowing desperately back to sea. The others were never seen again. Throughout the 19th century, there were repeated attempts at contact. Missionaries carrying gifts of food and clothing tried to approach, but none returned. Colonial officials described the island as impossible to pacify, its inhabitants wholly hostile to all outsiders. Shipwrecks along the reef became legends, whispered as cautionary tales to children. The sea might spit you out alive, but the island never would. Even in modern times, the pattern continued. In the 1970s, a team of anthropologists sought to study the tribe from afar. Using long-range lenses, they managed to capture grainy photographs of men and women painted in ash, standing motionless on the beach, weapons in hand. But when the team attempted to land, their boat was pelted with arrows. One man was struck in the leg. They retreated, and the images were all they carried back, images that fueled both academic fascination and public fear. Local fishermen tell stories that sound like ghost tales but are spoken with unwavering conviction. They say if your boat drifts too close, you will hear chanting from the tree line, rhythmic and haunting. Some claim to have seen fires burning deep in the forest, flickering shapes moving around them. One man described seeing a line of painted figures at the shore, standing shoulder to shoulder, watching him in absolute silence until he turned his boat away. "They let me go," he whispered to journalists decades later, "but they could have killed me. They wanted me to take the warning." The most infamous story came in the late 1990s, when a small documentary crew defied government warnings and sailed to the island. They were never seen again. Weeks later, their boat was found drifting, equipment broken, blood staining the deck. The footage they captured has never been released, if it even still exists. Their disappearance was explained as an unfortunate accident, but locals knew the truth. They had been killed for crossing a line no outsider was allowed to cross. Despite the danger, fascination with the island never faded. Some call it the last untouched civilization on Earth. Others describe it as proof of humanity's darkest instinct, to reject, to kill, to remain untamed no matter how much the world changes around it. And so, in 2012, a new group of outsiders decided to try their luck. They were young, adventurous, and convinced that technology and determination would protect them where others had failed. Their names were Michael Adams, Sarah Green, Connor Hayes, Rachel Torres, and David Lynn. They were travelers, bloggers, thrill seekers who wanted to capture what no one else had, the inside story of the Forbidden Island. They recorded everything, from their arrival at Port Blair, laughing as they packed supplies, to their first sight of the island rising like a green shadow on the horizon. In those recordings, their excitement is palpable. They talk about history, about making a name, for themselves, about telling the world the truth. But truth has a cost. because after setting foot on that forbidden shore, none of them were ever seen again. Later, fragments of their journey would resurface. A camera washed ashore, damaged but holding eerie images. Testimony from fishermen who swore they saw movement on the beach that night, and a trail of silence that leads only deeper into fear. This is not just the story of 5 young people who disappeared. It is the story of an island that rejects the outside world. An island where history repeats itself again and again, and where every intrusion ends in blood. This is the story of the island where outsiders are killed. The last known footage of the group begins with shaky laughter and the sound of waves crashing against the boat. Michael Adams, the self-appointed leader, holds the camera as he films the horizon. "There it is," he says, his voice full of awe. "The island. The one they say no one comes back from." His words are meant as a joke, but behind the laughter there's a flicker of nervous energy. The camera shifts to the others. Sarah Green, the most cautious of the group, bites her lip as she squints toward the landmass ahead. "It doesn't look dangerous," she says quietly. Connor Hayes, ever the thrill-seeker, grins wide. "That's the point. Places like this never look dangerous until you're inside." Rachel Torres rolls her eyes, adjusting her sunglasses, while David Lynn sits silently at the stern, checking the GPS. As the island grows larger in the frame, the mood changes. The laughter softens. The thick green wall of trees looms higher. The beach stretches empty and untouched. No signs of life, no boats, no huts, no smoke. Just silence. Michael whispers into the camera, "It feels like it's waiting for us." According to the timestamps recovered from the footage, they landed mid-afternoon. Their boat scraped against the reef, forcing them to wade the final stretch in shallow water. The sand beneath their feet was dazzling white, so clean it felt unreal. They cheered as they set up a small camp just beyond the tree line, eager to document their first steps into forbidden territory. But unease crept in almost immediately. Rachel's journal, later found waterlogged but legible in fragments, describes the first hours on the island. She writes about the stillness, how the forest seemed too quiet, how even birds and insects were absent. "It feels like the trees are holding their breath," she notes, "like the whole island knows we don't belong here." That night, they built a fire on the beach. Michael filmed everything. The group laughing, roasting bits of food, toasting, to being the first outsiders to survive the island. But when the camera pans toward the tree line, a set of glowing eyes appears for a brief second before vanishing into darkness. No one seemed to notice in the moment. At around 2 a.m., David began recording audio notes on a separate device. His voice is low, tense. "There are movements in the forest. I can hear them circling us. Leaves crunching, branches snapping, but every time I shine my flashlight, nothing's there. I don't think we're alone." The following morning, they woke to find the sand around their camp disturbed. Footprints, dozens of them. Bare, human, circling the fire pit. The group argued about what to do. Sarah wanted to leave immediately. Connor insisted it was proof they were onto something historic. Michael, ever determined, convinced them to stay. At least another day. That day's footage shows them exploring the edge of the jungle. Connor jokes as he swings a machete to clear brush, but the others look uneasy. The trees tower overhead, blotting out the sun, their trunks etched with strange markings, spirals, jagged lines, symbols carved deep into the bark. Sarah whispers, "It's the same as the stories. They mark their land. They're telling us to stop." By late afternoon, tension grew unbearable. In one clip, Rachel faces the camera directly. Her voice trembles as she says, "They're watching us. I can feel it. Every step we take, it's like eyes are on us. We're not exploring, we're trespassing." That night, the chanting began. At first, faint, carried by the wind. A low rhythm, human voices rising and falling together in a pattern that sent chills down the spine. Michael filmed the group huddled around the fire, their faces pale, their bodies rigid with fear. Connor tried to laugh it off. It's just the wind, or maybe animals. But no animal makes sounds like that. The chanting grew louder, closer, until it surrounded them. And then, just as suddenly, it stopped. David's audio note from that night is the most chilling. The silence after the chanting was worse, like they wanted us to know they could start again any time, like they're waiting for something. By dawn, Sarah begged to leave. She pleaded on camera, tears in her eyes, saying she couldn't take another night. Michael, still obsessed with documenting everything, argued they needed at least one more day to prove their journey mattered. The footage captures their fight. Voices raised, the group splintering under the weight of fear. But before they could decide, they found something on the beach. Half buried in the sand, at the edge of the tree line, lay a crude totem. A piece of driftwood carved into the shape of a distorted human figure, its face gouged out, its chest marked with spirals. Around its neck hung a necklace of bones, animal but unmistakably arranged with intention. Rachel's journal entry for that day reads, "It's not just a warning, it's a promise." That was the last entry dated before the group began to vanish, one by one. By the third day on the island, the cracks in the group's confidence had turned into fractures. Michael still clung to his camera as though documenting everything could keep them safe, while Sarah begged him to see reason. Connor joked less and less, his forced humor thinning into silence. Rachel grew quiet, her journal entries darker, her handwriting jagged. And David, once the calmest of them, began leaving audio logs that sounded less like observations and more like confessions. The first disappearance came in daylight. According to the timestamps, it happened around mid-morning. Connor had gone, a short distance into the tree line to relieve himself. He never came back. At first, the others laughed, calling his name, assuming he was trying to scare them. But minutes passed. Then an hour. When they went to look, they found no trace, no footprints, no broken branches, nothing. It was as if he had been swallowed whole by the forest. Michael kept the camera running as panic spread. The footage shows Sarah clutching her arms, whispering, "He's gone. He's not coming back." Rachel shouts Connor's name until her voice breaks. David stands motionless, scanning the trees. In one clip, he says quietly, almost to himself, "They took him. He didn't leave. He was taken." That night, the chanting returned, louder than before. The rhythm carried across the beach, rising from multiple directions. On the recording, Sarah sobs openly while Michael whispers to the camera, "It feels like they're celebrating." By morning, things worsened. Michael's camera captures Rachel pointing out new footprints in the sand. Larger this time, more numerous, circling their camp again. In the center of the ring of prints lay an object. Connor's shoe, ripped and stained dark. Rachel's journal from that morning is smeared, the ink blurred from what might have been tears or seawater. But one line is clear. We're next. The second disappearance came the following night. The footage is nearly unwatchable, shaky, blurred, the lens swinging wildly as the group scrambles. Torches light the darkness, the chanting echoing from the tree line. Suddenly, a scream pierces the night. The camera turns, capturing Sarah being dragged into the shadows by figures too quick to focus on. Painted bodies, weapons glinting in the firelight. Michael charges after her, but David pulls him back. The screen goes black as the camera slams into the sand. Sarah was never seen again. From that point, the recordings take a darker turn. Michael's voice is frantic, his hands trembling as he speaks into the lens. "We should have listened. We should have left. They're hunting us. They don't want us here. They never did." Behind him, Rachel stares blankly into the fire, rocking back and forth. David sharpens a stick into a crude spear, muttering, "We need to fight back." But how do you fight what you cannot see? The next day, Rachel wrote what would be her final entry. I keep seeing faces in the trees. Sometimes I think it's Connor. Sometimes I think it's Sarah. They're not gone. They're with them now. That evening, Rachel vanished. Michael's camera captures only fragments, shadows in the forest, the sound of feet pounding the sand, his voice shouting her name again and again until it breaks into sobs. When he returns to camp, only David remains. The two of them sit in silence for hours, the fire crackling, the darkness pressing closer. David's final audio log is the most haunting. His voice is ragged, almost broken. We should never have come. This island doesn't forgive. It doesn't forget. Outsiders don't belong here, and now neither do we. The last footage from Michael's camera shows him and David trying to push their boat back into the water under cover of night. They move quickly, desperately, dragging supplies across the sand. Behind them, dozens of painted figures emerge from the tree line, silent, watching. Michael drops the camera in the sand as they heave the boat into the surf. The image tilts sideways, capturing the last horrifying seconds. Figures rushing forward, weapons raised, the sound of splashing, shouts, screams, then silence. When the camera was recovered weeks later, half buried in wet sand on a distant beach, the memory card held only fragments. Those final screams cut off abruptly, replaced by the endless sound of waves. No bodies were ever found. When the group failed to return to Port Blair as scheduled, alarm spread quickly among friends and families. Back home, at first, authorities treated it as a simple case of lost travelers, an accident at sea, perhaps a storm. But when fishermen reported seeing flashes of light and hearing screams from the direction of the island on the same nights the footage recorded its horrors, the story took a darker turn. A search operation was launched 2 weeks later, though the island's reputation made even experienced crews hesitant. Naval patrol boats circled from a distance, scanning the beaches through binoculars and drones. From the air, the island looked untouched, its shoreline empty, its forest impenetrable. No sign of the 5 young adventurers. Then, a discovery. On a distant beach, dozens of miles from where the group had landed, fragments of equipment washed ashore. A camera, waterlogged but intact enough to yield memory cards. A backpack, its straps cut clean. Torn clothing, sun-bleached and stiff with salt. Among the items was Rachel's journal, pages smeared but still legible in places. The words painted a picture more chilling than any official report could. They're watching. They're waiting. We shouldn't be here. Authorities never confirmed the full contents of the recovered footage, but leaks spread quickly. Grainy clips appeared online, purporting to show shadows rushing from the trees, painted figures moving silently across the sand, the panicked voices of the travelers. While skeptics dismissed them as fabrications, the families insisted they were authentic. For them, the recordings were the only proof of what really happened. The official stance was cautious. Reports labeled the group's disappearance as tragic and preventable. Statements emphasized that the island was a restricted zone, its inhabitants protected under international law. Governments discouraged speculation, urging the public to respect the isolation of uncontacted peoples. But speculation thrived anyway. Anthropologists debated whether the tribe truly killed intruders or whether the outsiders had died from exposure, drowning, or internal conflict. Survival experts analyzed the footage frame by frame, pointing out details, the disturbed sand, the eerie silence, the chanting, that defied natural explanation. Locals, however, never doubted. Fishermen from nearby villages told investigators what they had always known. The island rejects outsiders. One man, old and weathered, recounted how his father had once ventured too close in a storm. He came back with arrows lodged in his boat, he said. They could have killed him, but they chose not to. They were sending a message: do not return. Another insisted he had seen the traveler's campfire from his boat one night, only for it to vanish suddenly, replaced by complete darkness. Like the fire was swallowed, he whispered. Theories multiplied. Some claimed the tribe viewed outsiders as threats to their survival and thus eliminated them without hesitation. Others suggested something more ritualistic, that the killings were not just defense but part of a cycle of offerings to the island itself. Rachel's final journal entry fueled this theory. They're not killing us. They're taking us. Perhaps the most unsettling speculation came from experts who noticed patterns in the symbols carved into the trees. Spirals, jagged lines, recurring shapes seen not only in the footage but in earlier photographs from the 1970s. Linguists suggested the symbols could represent cycles, transformations, or boundaries between worlds. It is not just territory marking, one anthropologist said. It is communication. They are saying, once you cross this line, you no longer belong to yourself. Despite warnings, curiosity only grew. Adventurers online debated launching new expeditions. Conspiracy forums buzzed with claims that governments were hiding the truth, that more footage existed, showing not just attacks but assimilation, outsiders joining the tribe, their identities erased. One viral post insisted that painted figures captured in blurry drone footage bore modern clothing, shirts, belts, fragments of backpacks. Evidence, the poster argued, that the lost were not dead but transformed. Families of the missing pushed for answers, demanding the release of all recovered materials. Authorities resisted, citing cultural protection laws and the risk of inspiring copycat expeditions. The silence only deepened the mystery. To this day, no official closure exists. The 5 young travelers, Michael Adams, Sarah Green, Connor Hayes, Rachel Torres, and David Lynn, remain listed as missing, presumed dead, but their story lingers, kept alive not by official reports, but by whispers, rumors, and the chilling fragments of their own recordings. And the island itself remains untouched. Patrols enforce the boundary, warning boats away. Satellite images show the same dense canopy, the same white beaches. Yet every so often, something slips through. A drone photo of totems standing in the sand. A blurry video of figures watching. From the tree line, a fire flickering deep in the jungle where no outsider should be. For those who live near the waters, the warning is simple. Stay away. They say the island is alive, that it remembers every intruder, that it guards its secrets with blood. The most haunting part is not that outsiders are killed. It is that the island decides who leaves and who does not. And in the silence of the waves, in the shadows of the trees, in the chants carried by the wind, one truth echoes. The island does not forgive. The island does not forget, and those who dare to step onto its shores disappear forever.